respiration? That's a posh word for breathing, isn't it?
No. It's a very common mistake, though, and the two are closely linked.
So what's the difference?
Well, the fact that respiration is basically a chemical reaction that happens in every animal and plant cell.
Okay, I'm with you so far.
Good. Now this chemical reaction is where we get our energy from.
So how does that work then?
Do you remember our animal cell? Well, it contains glucose, which is a very simple sugar. And we all know that when we breathe in air, oxygen gets into our cells. The oxygen and the glucose react together to produce carbon dioxide, water, and energy.
Is that it?
Yes.
So respiration is the chemical reaction of oxygen and glucose to form carbon dioxide, water, and energy.
Yes, and respiration not only happens in animal cells, but in plant cells too.
Oh, right. So plant and animal cells respire because they need to create energy for life processes.
So cellular respiration releases chemical energy from glucose and other carbon-based molecules. So we want to look at where in the cell does that happen, which is the mitochondria, which makes sense because remember that is the powerhouse of the cell. And cellular respiration takes place in 3 steps: glycolysis, the Krebs cycle, and the electron transport chain. The first one, glycolysis, happens in the cytoplasm, where the other 2 happen actually in the mitochondria. So let's zoom in and take a look at mitochondria to see what actually happens. So here we've got glucose. ATP comes in. It breaks that glucose apart. Some more ADP comes in. That turns into ATP. Whoa, wait, hold on a second. Let's rewind that a little bit. What in the world is this ATP stuff? We haven't really talked about that at all, and it's a pretty important chemical in your body. So I'm going to turn it over to Hank and let him explain it to you.
Called ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. You've heard me talk about this before. People often refer to ATP as the currency of biological energy. Think of it as an American dollar. It's what you need to do business in the US. You can't just walk into a Best Buy with a handful of Chinese yen or Indian rupees and expect to be able to buy anything with them, even though they're technically our money. Same goes with energy. In order to be able to use it, our cells need energy to be transferred into adenosine triphosphate to be able to grow, move, create electrical impulses in our nerves and brains, everything. Now, before we see how ATP is actually put together, let's look at how cells can cash in on the energy that's stashed in there. Well, adenosine triphosphate is made up of a nitrogenous base called adenine with a sugar called ribose and 3 phosphate groups attached to it. Now, one thing you need to know about these 3 phosphate groups is that they are super uncomfortable sitting together in a row like that, like 3 kids on a bus who hate each other all sharing the same seat. So because the phosphate groups are such terrible company for each other, ATP is able to do this nifty trick where it shoots one of the phosphate groups off the end of the seat, creating ADP, or adenosine diphosphate, because now there are just 2 kids sitting on the bus seat. In this reaction, when the 3rd jerk kid is kicked off the seat, energy is released.
The reverse can also happen because ADP is like a rechargeable battery. I use rechargeable batteries all the time because my Xbox controllers are constantly going dead. So right now, there's only 2 phosphates. So in order to go the reverse, all we have to do is add a phosphate so that it becomes ATP. It's as simple as that. We had a rechargeable battery, now it's charged up, and it is officially ATP. So now you have a better sense of what ATP is. Let's go back and take a look at what's happening inside that mitochondria. We actually need ATP to get the process going, to break up that glucose. And at the end of glycolysis, we actually only end up with 4 ATP, which is not a lot. Our body needs a lot more than that. The rest of cellular respiration takes place inside the mitochondria, and it is an aerobic process, which means it requires oxygen. This is why you breathe, because your mitochondria use that oxygen. We're going to zoom in here. There are a lot of different processes that take place, which you don't need to know about, so I'm speeding it up. We get to the second part of cellular respiration, which is the Krebs cycle. And this is where CO2 is expelled. This is what we breathe out. It also creates some energy-carrying molecules, which we go into the third step, which is the electron transport chain. Again, a lot of different processes that are going on that you don't need to memorize. We're concerned with the end products, which are water and ATP, which can be used in your body and in your cells for lots of different things. Okay, so I'm going to turn it back over to Hank and let him summarize up cellular respiration to see what went into it and what comes out.
Cellular respiration is how we derive energy from the food that we eat, specifically from glucose, since most of what we eat ends up as glucose. Here's the chemical formula for 1 molecule of glucose. In order to turn this glucose into energy, we're going to need to add some oxygen, 6 molecules of it to be exact. Through cellular respiration, we're going to turn that glucose and oxygen into 6 molecules of CO2, 6 molecules of water, and some energy that we can use for doing all of our push-ups.